Kopra Pak, or Nariyal ki Burfi, is a true celebration of coconut. My mom made this all the time as mithai for Diwali or for other celebrations, and Kopra Pak was just kind of this decadent sweet that was made in every household, was sold at every mithai shop. And I have a particular preference for a type of Kopra Pak. I love the mithai shop Kopra Pak. That's just so decadent and coconutty and has the creaminess from mawa and spices added. So I'm going to share my favorite Kopra Pak. It's so easy to make at home, and I am using a couple of tips and tricks to enhance the coconutty flavor and also to make it look super fancy like a mithai shop coconut burfi or Kopra Pak. So let me show you what my ingredients are. So I'm using desiccated coconut. This is dried coconut. My mom always made it with fresh coconut that she grated by hand, and I tested it that way, and honestly, it's not worth the effort. So I'm going to use store-bought dried desiccated coconut, and it works out perfectly. I have some mawa. This is homemade mawa, but you can use store-bought mawa as well, and my recipe for mawa is linked on the website. Here's the non-traditional ingredient. I'm using evaporated coconut milk. This works really well with just regular evaporated milk, or even just regular milk or regular coconut milk. But I really love the flavor that the evaporated coconut milk gives. Just using regular granulated sugar. Have some saffron, which is completely optional, but really adds to that delicious, luxurious, decadent flavor. Cardamom, which is also optional, but I think it is a must in almost all Indian sweets. I have some chopped nuts. I have pistachios and cashews sliced really thinly. These are completely optional. You do not need to add those. I am also using nutmeg, which is again also optional. And then I have a little bit of ghee to grease my pan. You could use anything you like. If you'd like to keep it vegan or dairy-free, you can skip the ghee. And if you'd like to make this a dairy-free recipe, a dairy-free milk or coconut milk works really well. And instead of mawa, you can use soaked and blended cashew, like cashew cheese, which would work really well as well. The other thing that makes homemade Kopra Pak special is to use varag or silver foil. And this is easily available on Amazon. I'll link it in the blog post. But adding silver foil to any mithai just makes it so much more special. So this is edible silver foil. And let me show you what it looks like. There it is, edible silver foil, and it's just a super thin layer of silver foil, which gets added to so many different Indian sweets, and I love adding it to my homemade sweets to make them look more professional and fancy, and just to add that extra touch of luxury for celebrations like Diwali and birthdays and things like that. A few special pieces of equipment makes making Indian mithai so much easier, especially this Kopra Pak. I'm using a square cheesecake tin that I got from Amazon, and I'll link that in the blog post. But what's amazing about this is that the bottom separates. So literally you can push the bottom out to create even, easy squares, and you can just kind of cut them out, and you don't have to worry about the corners sticking, and it makes mithai cutting and separating just so much easier. I also have a microplane here, which I love for adding fresh nutmeg. So I'll just grate the nutmeg straight into my mithai. And then the last thing is just a bench scraper, but I find using a bench scraper makes cutting the squares of the mithai so much easier than using a knife, because you can go straight down and it easily helps make straight lines. So these are the 3 special pieces of equipment that I use for my mithai. And now let's get started. So to start, I started my saffron blooming by adding an ice cube to the saffron and just trying to cover up as much of the saffron as I possibly can with the ice cube, and just let that sit while I get everything else ready. I'm going to set my pan to start heating, and while that is heating up, I'm going to grease my tray. So I have a little bit of ghee. I like to just use my fingers, but a brush works really well too. add the milk to a pan and let that start heating up. Add the sugar. And give that a good stir. We're looking for the sugar to melt completely. So this is starting to boil a little bit and the sugar is starting to melt. It's pretty close to all melted in. So I'm going to add the saffron. Add the mava. And let that kind of melt and crumble a little bit, heat through. I'm just trying to blend the mava a little bit. My mava has been in the fridge for a couple of days, and so it got a little bit dry, so I'm just kind of letting it get a little bit more melty. And there it is, it's broken up into smaller crumbles and it's starting to melt into here. So now add the coconut flakes. I'm going to turn the heat down to about low and just mix the flakes. You can see the pieces of mava that I can just kind of mush in now and blend into the Kopra Pak. Stir and mix and kind of mush all the mava in so it merges into just one mixture that doesn't have clumps of mava left. Okay, and stir for about 2 minutes, mashing it all together. Now add the cardamom and grate in the nutmeg, just a little bit of nutmeg. I like to do about 1/8 of a whole nutmeg and mix that in well. Okay. Okay, I'm going to test it. It's hot. I'm just going to test it on the counter. I'm going to clump it together, and if it forms a shape and stays, then it is ready to go. And there it is. It's staying and it is not crumbly. Just the perfect texture for what I'm looking for. There it is. I'm going to take this off the heat and put it into the mold. All right. Okay, I'm just pushing this into my pan, and I'm using a combination of a silicone spatula and an offset spatula, and just kind of smoothing this out. So now I have this in my cheesecake pan. I'm going to add my silver foil. Going to take the whole thing directly and try to add it like that. There we go. Just push it on. Going to do the same with the second piece. I'm going to try to just do half and then other half. It does not have to be perfect at all, because you will have different squares, and different amounts of silver foil on different squares is totally fine. And then once the foil is on there, I'm going to add a little bit of the nuts as well. Nuts are completely optional, but I think they just look so pretty. Just going to kind of push them on, especially on the areas where there is no foil. Now I'm going to score the Kopra Pak and then let it cool. So I'm going to try to find the half and push that in. Try to do the same here. Okay. And then do the same here. Okay, now I'm going to let this cool at room temperature for about an hour or two, and then I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll refrigerate it. The Kopra Pak has rested for a couple of hours, so let's unmold it. I'm using a glass, and I'm using my cheesecake tray that separates from the bottom, so I just place it on top of the glass, and I slowly slide the box down, and I can move the tray back down to my counter. I'm going to use the offset spatula to just kind of scrape it. Use the offset spatula to just scrape it off the bottom. And it just separates really nicely. There it is. Nice and gooey, perfectly delicious Kopra Pak squares. So good. It's really moist and coconutty and rich and just so sweet and so good.